All right, guys, this here is my favorite clip of the day, probably, because it just shows you there's no correlation between how passionate a politician is and how correct they are. And that goes for commentators too, right? Somebody can be super passionate, but just dead wrong. And so here we have a Republican representative. His name is Jeff Duncan of South Carolina. And he's going to start ranting and raving and railing against the Democrats. And he's proud that, you know, us Republicans, first thing we're going to do is roll back this IRS increase, bro. That's what we're going to do because we're looking out for working people, bro. And he does that. He messes up, though. He does that at the same time he does some deficit hawk nonsense. And there's a fundamental contradiction there that's pointed out in like 2 sentences from a Democratic politician. So let me show you this. And then I'm also going to give you some facts on this Republican rollback of the new IRS increases. Why it's not at all pro-working class. It is pro-plutocrat and oligarch what they did. And that's not an opinion. That's a fact. And I'll prove it to you in a minute. So first, let's watch the video.
1,740 new IRS agents in every state for one purpose: to go after small businesses, hardworking Americans who try to raise money to pay for reckless spending. Reckless spending that's caused $31 trillion in debt in this nation. This is the right thing to do. I tell you what, we could repurpose those agents to the southern border, or we could repurpose them and let them build the Keystone XL pipeline. You know what? There was about estimated 61,000 lost jobs with the Keystone XL.
Fake number, by the way. The long-term jobs for Keystone were like under 100.
Pipeline when Biden administration canceled that project. But yet we turn around and government hires 87,000 new IRS agents to go after your constituents and mine. I mentioned earlier the number. Look it up. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
My friend, that the first bill you're doing is going to add $114 billion to the deficit. Enough.
1,700.
We're going to spend all this money on the IRS and we got all this debt, bro. Got to fix this debt, bro. Dude's like, yeah, this exact thing you're doing is adding to the deficit. So, might want to reel it in, bro. If you can get owned in like a 1 or 2 sentence response, man, swing and a miss, homie. Swing and a miss. But again, let's go a step further here. So this whole, this move that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, this expansion of the IRS. What are the specifics of that? Because Republicans, they thrive on being vague, right? Like, nobody likes paying their taxes. Nobody likes the IRS. So when you hear, oh my God, they're growing the IRS, bro, you're going to hear that. And normal people, and I understand this, normal people go, oh, that sounds bad. Are they going to come after me? What's going on here? I don't like this. Well, let me give you the specifics. Okay, this is in the New York Times. The funding to the IRS will enable the IRS to increase its workforce over the next 10 years to 113,000 employees. That is about the same number of workers it employed annually in the early 1990s. So in other words, they stripped it down. There was a war on the IRS. They stripped it down, and now they're just bringing it back to 1990s level. They continue. In a September speech, Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, outlined some of that hiring. An additional 5,000 customer service representatives and fully staffing the agency's taxpayer assistance centers. So in other words, it's not just agents who are, breaking down your door trying to shake you down. And they say, and they're committed to not raise audit rates for households making under $400,000 a year. That's part of the legislation. So the whole point of funding the IRS is to bring it back to the level it was at in the 1990s, and it's specifically to go after the top 3% or so of the country. So they're just lying about it when they're we're going to protect the working class by defunding the IRS agents who are going after the oligarchs and the plutocrats and the wealthy. Okay, let me give you a little bit more here. I love this. Look at this. In the past decade, tax audit rates have fallen most starkly for higher income earners, which the IRS attributes to diminished resources and therefore its inability to retain specialized auditors needed to examine the filings of the wealthy. Increasing funding for the IRS, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said in September 2021, would address those needs and result in increased audit rates for everyone, particularly for high-income earners. Okay, so what they're saying here, to sum it up, is because the IRS, there's been a war on the IRS. They've stripped down the IRS. And as a result of that, the remaining agents say, okay, well, we're going to default to doing what the easiest thing to do is, because there's so few of us, we're so overworked. The easiest thing is go after the middle income earners and the low income earners. It is way easier to crack down on them than it is to crack down on the wealthy, because the wealthy have all these experts, all these attorneys, all these specialists who help them find every single, loophole and deduction, legal or illegal, and they exploit them. And so in order to audit one of these wealthy folks, guys, in order to go after one of them, you need like a whole bunch of really expert IRS agents who know what they're doing. So those guys are gone. They've been gone. So now the stripped down IRS targets the lower class and the middle class. And so this whole move to increase the funding was, hey, let's bring it back to 1990s levels and finally go after the wealthy a little bit more again. And so, again, it's what I call fake populism. These guys are doing fake populism. Look, I'll give another example of this because I feel like this is a very striking example. I remember when I was younger, my uncle, he used to be a hippie when he was younger, super lefty, and then him and his wife, my aunt, became very conservative Christian and hardcore Republicans. And I remember he said to me when I was working like my first real job, he goes, Kyle, one of these days you'll understand. The reason you vote Republican is you want to keep more of that money in your paycheck. And, you hear that and you go, it's a simple claim. It strikes deep for most people. Like, yeah, I want to keep more of my money. Get out of here. Of course I do. I don't make all that much money. Of course I need to keep it. But the problem is, and I remember going through the specifics at the time, looking through the 2008 John McCain versus Barack Obama proposed tax plans. What he didn't realize is, dude, you were duped. The Republicans actually keep taxes higher on the working class. They keep it higher. Their own proposed tax rates, their own plans, raise taxes on people like you. Now, the Democrats, look, they never talk about the fact that they actually are for cutting taxes on the working class way more than Republicans are. And honestly, that's a branding problem and a marketing problem for them. Like, get it together. Because that is a populist appeal. Hey, I want to cut taxes for you, regular working person, and I want to give you better services. So they never say that, which is a problem. But when the Republicans talk about, we're going to cut taxes, even if they say, it's for the working class, they don't mean, it's not actually for you. It's for the wealthy, and sometimes it's for the upper middle class as well. But it is never for the working class, for the poor, for the people struggling. And so, like, the marketing of the Republicans got through to my uncle, and he believed this to his core. That, like, the reason why the Republicans are more the party of the working class is because they want to cut taxes on working people, and Democrats want to raise it. That is fundamentally inaccurate. And I remember going through the proposed tax plans from Obama and McCain at the time, because they were running, and it was striking. And it was like, wow, Obama wants to cut taxes more for people who make, I think it was like under $250,000 or under $150,000. It was somewhere in there. I was like, that's, 90% of the country. So he wants to cut taxes more for 90% of the country, and nobody even says it. Nobody even says that. And look, I just had this in the debate with the PBD guys, right? Lovely guys. Loved our conversation there. But, Patrick Bet-David goes, I believe in a flat tax. And, okay, look, in theory, does that sound appealing? Yeah, 15% across the board for everybody, end of conversation. Very simple. Done, right? Well, what's the problem with that in reality? The problem is you have 50% of the country, maybe even a little more than that pays zero federal income tax. Why? Because they can't afford it. They don't make any money. They make next to nothing, so they can't afford to pay federal income tax. With a 15% flat tax rate across the board, it's what's called a regressive tax. What does that mean? It means it functionally raises taxes on the poor and the middle class and decreases taxes on the wealthy. And so for this idea that sounds simple in theory, in practice, it's a terrible idea. And it's a class warfare idea where the billionaires and the corporations and the wealthy are screwing the working people yet again. So anyway, I hope this gets through to some people, but these people are not populist. They don't understand basic. How are you going to rant against, what the Democrats did with the IRS, and then in the next breath say, what about the deficit, bro? what you're doing right now is going to increase the deficit. What's wrong with you? They don't need logic. They don't need rationality. They don't need math. They just bloviate. That's their game. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.